Hey, Jesse.
Hey, hey,
Looks like everybody is logging in. Give everybody a second.
sounds good.
Jesse, you're coming to us from LA, right?
Yes, from my mom and dad's house.
Mom and dad's. Love that.
And where are you
Have
tuning in from, Tori?
I'm in New York City. I am in the heart of the pandemic, as they've been saying. It's been an interesting few weeks. I guess it's been uh, almost 2 months of this. Yeah,
Yeah,
for
that's
us.
wild.
Yeah. I mean, luckily, I am in Queens, a little bit away from the heart of the scene in terms of what people like to think of it as, but it's pretty quiet in the neighborhood except for some sirens and helicopters. So
Wow.
comes and goes.
Yeah, well, thanks for holding it down there at the such an important city right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. It'll be nice to get away from here eventually and get a little space, but it's an eye-opening experience to be in New York City, and I wouldn't trade it.
I like that
It's home.
attitude. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as you know, that's where I spent the past 17 years of my life. And I just moved to LA a couple months ago. And see, before we get into the convo, I'm only seeing my face. I'm not seeing yours.
Okay.
Um, do you know if there's a way? I think I may have spotlighted it. I just canceled it. I just want to make sure this is all right, or if you want it to be just on my face for the whole talk.
I mean, I see both of us. Can everyone
Okay,
else see
cool.
both of us? Anybody, if you can just in the chat, maybe say, yeah, you can see both of us. Um,
It's good on my end now if it works for everyone else.
okay. They're saying they can see both of us.
Great.
I don't know why you can't see me.
I can now. I'm good now. I
Oh,
just
okay.
canceled the spotlight.
Oh, okay, good. Okay, great. Well, I think we can go ahead and get started. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in and thank Jesse for joining us. My name is Tori Mara, and I am one of the three co-founders of Outspoken Agency, and we are a speaking agency based in New York City, where I currently am, like I said. And Outspoken Agency is a speaking agency that represents thought leaders, uh, people like Jesse, and we do our job is to connect them with event hosts, whether that be conferences, private businesses, schools, universities, to create some great events. And so for us, we found it as a time where we were lacking connection in what we do for our day-to-day work. So we thought it would be an important time for us to connect our clients, our friends, our colleagues with some of our speakers, because they have such a wide breadth of expertise in various topics and industries, and they could provide some great information for us in what we're dealing with right now. They travel the world. Jesse travels all over the place, talking about a lot of what he'll be speaking to today, but he doesn't always get the chance to connect with some of these people on a very basic level, give insights into things that are very specific to what we're dealing with right now. Although I'm sure we'll learn that we can utilize these tools throughout our lives, throughout the years to come. So it was important for us to find a time to connect on screen while we physically distance. So for today, we'd like to think of it as a little bit of a mental health day. We can check in with our clients and our friends, with Jesse, and kind of recognize, what we're dealing with physiologically and psychologically. And so we're really excited to have Jesse on here to talk to you and talk to me about everything. And we're going to be able to take some questions. We had some questions pre-submitted. There's also a Q&A box on your navigation bar where you're able to submit questions, and we'll figure out what you're dealing with and try to get you a little bit of insight and tips from Jesse based on what he's learned so far from his meditation practice and his work with the Big Quiet. So very, very quickly, and I'll let Jesse take over in terms of telling us more about himself. Jesse is the founder of the Big Quiet, and it is a mass meditation movement. They gather thousands of people for these large scale moments of quiet connection and they do these amazing musical performances in some of the coolest places around the world. I've been fortunate enough to join Jesse in the Big Quiet at the World Trade Center and Madison Square Garden, but he has done them in other cool places outside of New York City, and most recently was on tour with none other than Oprah Winfrey. So we've been very excited for him on what's happened recently in his life, and just excited for him to share some more with us. So Jesse, if you want to give us a little bit more insight into your background, how you came to this meditation practice, and kind of how work has changed for you during this pandemic.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for the thoughtful intro, Tori. Yeah, so my story as it relates to meditation, my meditation journey really begins when I was 20 years old. I was a sophomore at NYU, and I, with my roommate, decided to start a record label out of our dorm room, and we started managing a college band called MGMT. At the time, they were just students making songs in their dorm room, and we formed this label to put out their first album. And over the course of the next couple of years, MGMT became a global sensation. This was 2009. And we had this really great journey where we were college students and really driven and excited about work and culture, full-time students, while also being guys who were running a business full-time. And by the time I was 23 and I had graduated from NYU, I had this really exciting career unfolding. But internally, I was not happy. And I was confused. I was experiencing pretty debilitating anxiety. I was having panic attacks, having bouts of depression. It was weird to me because I felt like I was supposed to be good because things in my career were feeling exciting. As a man, it didn't really feel like the type of stuff that I could talk about with other men. And in the music industry at that time, we weren't having conversations about our internal realities, right? So much of our work was about partying and signing bands and working hard. So it was a strange reality for me. And I started to explore it on my own. I found meditation just by Googling about it. And I learned to practice. I brought in a daily practice of just 5 minutes of quiet a day. It was incredibly helpful for me. And as I started to experience some of the benefits and noticed that things like the high levels of stress, the anxiety and panic attacks started to shift, my relationship to things that once I reacted really stressfully to, I was able to be more thoughtfully responsive to. I found that I was getting sick all the time. And once I started practicing meditation, my immune system was strengthening. I was actually sleeping at night. And the thing that was most exciting to me was that I found that with less of these blocks, I was able to get a lot more clear about what I stood for. I got a lot more aligned with what felt good to me in regards to how I showed up in relationships, in work, in regards to social and romantic dynamics. I just started to feel a lot more clear about me, what I cared about, what I stood for, what was fulfilling, and having that stronger connection to myself, just started to feel a lot more comfortable with my connection with other people. And I started to look into what was going on, the science and benefits of meditation. And what I found was that, meditation turns off the body's fight or flight response. And we'll get into this a little bit later in our talk, but it turns off the body's fight or flight response, which is our body's stress response. And it turns on the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the body's relaxation response. And this simply happens because when we practice meditation, when we close our eyes and sit in quiet just for a few moments, we bring an accelerated form of rest into the body's system. And when this happens and the body's nervous system starts to balance out, we can show up more optimally, more fully like ourselves. And I was really excited about the science and benefits of that, and found that I was able to start to bring it to other people in the music industry. So as I moved through my 20s, running this business and eventually raising a technology fund, and we were essentially signing bands and investing in tech startups, I found myself in positions where the people that I would work with were interested in meditation, and they knew it was something I was into, and they would ask me about it. And, I would be backstage at music festivals, meditating with other music managers and other musicians, literally sharing quiet in the face of tons of noise, music festival right around us. And loved having these moments where I could be with people in my industry and slow down. And then after we would meditate, what I found was that oftentimes other people in my industry would feel comfortable sharing about what was really going on in their lives. And I started to hear that so many other people were going through a lot of the same challenges that I was going through, regardless of our perceived success or the commitments that we were really making to working hard, that we had an internal reality and challenges that were really similar to each other's, but we were never talking about. And there was something about accessing quiet, going inward, and then going outward and talking about what was real for us that felt so healing and validating. There was something transformative about practicing meditation together, but there's also a sense of community that I was really yearning for. I really felt a lot of loneliness living in New York City, and felt a lot of loneliness in the music business. So 6 years ago, I wound up leaving my company and decided that I would dedicate myself to building community around meditation and spaces where we could talk about what was really going on. And it was a really bizarre leap because I had spent 10 years building a company and it was all I had known. I had just turned 30, and I identified so much with my career and being this label guy. And what I knew inside of me that it was time for the next thing. I tried different ways to make it work within my company, but it was just so strong in my gut. My intuition was so clearly saying, it's time for the next journey. So, I took that leap, and it was very bizarre because I, in many ways, felt like I was resetting. And I went through this period where I was just doing so much comparison to my peers. I'm about to turn 30 years old, and I'm watching all my friends build meaningful careers and move up at their companies. And, I was just going through it and feeling a lot of self-doubt. And it was a position that I put myself in. I made the decision to leave the company, and it was a cool company. I was in a position of privilege where I could even do that in the first place. And it was just a strange time for me. And it felt like all the more reason to have space where I could gather with other people to just talk about what was real, to get quiet together. So I organized a 20-person group meditation. I had a lot of free time now because I'd left my business, and I had a few months of financial runway to just, kind of experiment. So I organized a 20-person group meditation in my buddy's apartment, and it was cool. It was people from the music industry and the tech space and people I knew from New York. And we got quiet together, and there was something sort of awkward about sitting in silence because our lives were so busy. They were so fast and constant. And those really were the settings that we knew each other in. So here we were in my buddy's apartment, just being quiet for 20 minutes. And then after the meditation, we started to talk about the things that were really happening for us. And just like I felt with these groups at music festivals, behind the scenes, I felt this really meaningful sense of connection, this sense of belonging and being human, and that being okay. And there was something about slowing down to access that, and then having permission to talk about that, and doing it in a setting that felt relatable with a lot of my work colleagues. We never had space for this type of stuff. And it felt so good to be able to facilitate that and to offer that to my peers. And I decided that I was really going to dedicate myself to that work. No idea what the financial model would be, but I knew that it served something important. I sensed that there was a real need for this. And the 20-person gathering turned into 30 people the next month and 50 the next month. And by the 5th or 6th month, there were 100 plus people squeezing into my buddy's apartment. So it was clear that there was an opportunity to take this blend of ingredients, quiet space, safe space to talk, and doing it in an accessible environment. And we could take those ingredients and share them with the city at large. So we created the Big Quiet as a way to do that at scale. And the first Big Quiet was a partnership with the City Parks Foundation in New York. We did the first Big Quiet at Central Park. And it was the first time that had ever happened before. First time the city had backed something like that. And it was great because we could open it up to all the boroughs and anyone that wanted to come. And it just felt really good. So to wrap this up, over the past 5 years, the Big Quiet has grown, like Tori mentioned. We've been able to tour it and bring it to hundreds of thousands of people in person, millions of people online. I talk a lot about meditation, what it does to the body's nervous system, how it enhances leadership, how it really can improve our contributions to the workplace and to our personal lives and beyond. And I'm really passionate about this stuff and just really excited about how it's grown.
That's amazing. Yeah, I know just from experiencing both the Big Quiet and the Big Quiet sister version, I guess you could say, Medi Club, which is the big quiet at a smaller scale. Usually what, 1 to 200 people, you'd say?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a unique opportunity to feel like you're connected with a large community that you don't even know usually going in until you start to go regularly, and obviously you build that community from there. But part of the big quiet is that it's touring and you're going on a one-off event, but you're able to make space to build community in that moment. And it's something that you talk about a lot, is that a lot of our generation has separated themselves from religion and that dynamic of attending church weekly. And there's this replacement idea with using something like Club to build community and build that space to talk about things that involve some vulnerability that we often are missing out on as a culture.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that I've seen, the thing that stood out to me most doing this work over the past 5 years, and I've been building community and experimenting with community building for, I'd say, probably the past 15 years. The thing that's really stood out to me most is that what I believe people crave most and yearn for most is human connection. And I think that, we're living in a time where this hunger and this need is heightened because of how much is changing around us. Part of that is that my generation, our generation, doesn't affiliate with religion in the way that previous generations do or did. About 2/3 of millennials don't affiliate with religion anymore. And religion was such a meaningful space, and for those that participate still, can be such a meaningful space for human connection, for space to gather, to talk about what's real, to explore the self and beyond. And for so many of us that don't feel like we can access those spaces, or maybe don't feel comfortable in those spaces, we're yearning for something more. And what tends to happen is we fill that void with technology. And technology can feel like a meaningful connective source. So many of us are using it, especially right now through this pandemic. But what so much research and science shows is that the more digitally connected we become, the more lonely we feel. And because we're not really taught how to use our devices in the way that we're taught how to do so many other things in our lives, it's really tough to create boundaries and to understand how to use our devices in a way that support us and support our work and our social habits without depleting us and starting to take over our lives. So what I see is that, and I hear this all the time, people feel very overwhelmed by the digital input and information overload that we experience on a regular day, that there's a bar that's been set so high that we're expected to output on, right? That the level that we're expected to be doing and working and hustling and pushing and going and sharing and posting, the bar has been set so high that it feels unsustainable for so many of us. And as a result of this really unique way that we're living right now, this is only, arguably the past 50 plus years that has been happening. But as a result of this, a lot of us feel disconnected from ourselves and feel disconnected from each other. And this really greatly has an impact in our work lives, in our personal lives, in our family lives, in our romantic lives. And what I see is that what most people are waiting for is just some form of permission to have that deeper connection with themselves and especially with other people. And what I mean by that is when one person just extends an invite to someone else to do something in a group, even if it's coming together to sit down and close your eyes like we do, if it's coming together to ride bikes like my bike club does. I used to have a cheeseburger club where we would come together and we would eat burgers together, right? I've when I talk about this at corporations, I've seen really awesome creativity come to life. I've seen company teams come together on Friday nights to watch Scary Movie Club. Whatever the concept is, whatever the simple shared purpose is, people are just yearning for permission and reason to gather, to be with each other. And one thing that I've actually been really enjoying seeing right now, although I know it can be overwhelming for a lot of us, I'm seeing more and more community leadership happening virtually because people are feeling so isolated and coming up with reasons to gather people through Zoom or in whatever digital capacity makes sense for them. And I do know that for a lot of us, it's feeling really overwhelming because there's a lot of digital social life happening. But what I do love is that people are open to and extending their leadership to gathering each other at a time where I feel like we're really disconnected and really in need of each other.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that we are trying to all recognize and deal with and manage in our own ways our body's response to what's happening right now. And it's affecting us all individually in very different ways, whether it's in a very specific, visceral, location wise way for me versus someone who lives in middle America who maybe isn't even in a state that is actually quarantining or following these isolation rules. But we all have things that are affecting us, whether our jobs, our personal family dynamics. And so I'd love to just talk a little bit more about what's happening to our bodies right now and how we can kind of get into a little bit more control and change our response to that. I know you kind of touched on that state of fight or flight, but I'd love for us to dive into that a little bit more.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so the way that I like to look at and talk about stress and the way that we experience stress and mental health challenges in this day and age, I know so many of us have experienced this stuff, is really through the lens of sort of our evolutionary biological standpoint of being humans. So, I like to look at it from the view of when we lived in tribes, when we were hunters and gatherers, which is how we existed for the great majority of our time on this earth, arguably million plus years. It's only been roughly 15,000 years that we haven't lived in tribes en masse. So pretty short blip in the amount of time we've existed as humans. But when we lived in tribes, and if we were going out to, let's say, hunt for the day's lunch, and we were on the path, ready to find our food, and a saber-toothed tiger jumped out on that path in front of us, a series of biological responses would kick into the body to put us in a position where we could either fight that tiger or flee. And when we're faced with a human hungry predator like a saber-toothed tiger, this biological response is really important. It's called the fight or flight response. It's also known as the sympathetic nervous system. So when this happens, a couple of things snap right in. The first is that cortisol gets released in our blood. And cortisol can be really helpful when we deal with it for short periods of time, because it essentially is like an alarm system for the body. It says to the body, we're under attack. It's time to shift into survival mode. The arteries start to shrink and our blood thickens. And this is so if we were to get bit by that predator, by that tiger, we wouldn't bleed out as much. Our blood also becomes more acidic, so we don't taste as good to that tiger if we were to get bit. Our muscles tense up so they can be prepared to either fight or flee. Our digestive systems and reproductive systems fully turn off, so we have more energy to go towards our survival. And when we are faced with something that's life-threatening, this is a really helpful state to be in. Now, here we are today, and like I mentioned, in a relatively short period of time, our lives have drastically shifted with not enough time for our bodies to evolutionarily and biologically evolve. So here we are, 15,000 years later, and we get a rude email from a colleague and the fight or flight response gets triggered. We feel that sort of blood boil. We feel the cortisol move through. We feel that sensation in the stomach. The heart starts to pound. We only focus in on this one thing, that tunnel vision. The muscles tense up. The stomach starts to shut off, right? All of these experiences that we can relate to when we have these high stress moments. If we're sitting in a car and we're in traffic and we're late for a meeting and all the cars are just blowing their horns at each other, no one's about to die. Hopefully not in that situation. We're usually just late for a meeting or an appointment, but the body's response to it, we hit the steering wheel and we feel like we want to yell at someone outside. This is the fight or flight response. And our body's having all the same physiological reaction that we would if we were facing a life-threatening situation. But of course, these are not life-threatening situations. So in this modern day today, especially living in a modern city, we can experience on average about 25 fight or flight triggers on a daily basis. And because it takes the body's metabolism about 90 minutes to shift from fight or flight back to a calmer state, most of us are in a constant state of fight or flight. And I know that right now, when we're living in this pandemic, it doesn't feel comfortable to talk about this, that it's like, who wants to hear about all of this stress when we're already experiencing so much stress? And the reason why I do take a moment to highlight it is because I think it's really important to understand what's going on in our bodies just at a baseline level, just on a daily basis. This is what so many of us are experiencing. When we understand what's happening, it makes it a lot easier how to make sense of solutions so we can take responsibility for our own well-being. So much of this toxic stress culture that we experience in our lives and in work really has become the norm for so many of us today. And the reality is, if we're able to make sense of what's going on and start to learn simple tools and solutions, changes in our lives, in our leadership, in the way we show up at work and beyond, we can really bring some power back into how we can live more healthy and meaningful lives. So when we practice meditation, or when we take some space to slow down, maybe close our eyes, notice our breath, or maybe go into a deeper practice, 5 or 10 minutes, like we're going to do together on this call, something really simple happens. Just through this simple daily practice, we bring rest into the body. And when we practice meditation, we're bringing a form of rest into our system that is exponentially more restful than sleep. A lot of science shows that meditation can bring rest into the system that's about 5 to 8 times more restful than sleep. So it's an accelerated form of rest that we bring into the body's system. And when we practice this quiet or practice this meditation, what we do is we're turning off the fight or flight response. The sympathetic nervous system shifts off when we practice meditation. And what it does is it turns on the parasympathetic nervous system, which is known as the relaxation response. And when the relaxation response kicks on, all the opposite physiological reactions that we have in fight or flight happen. So our arteries open, our blood thins, right? So the blood flows more fluidly. Instead of cortisol, right, that sort of stress response alarm in the body's system, instead of cortisol getting pumped through the blood, serotonin and dopamine, which are chemicals that create a natural sensation and sense of well-being, happiness, pump through our blood naturally just from practicing quiet meditation. We find that our muscles loosen. The digestive system starts to operate more fluidly. The reproductive system really starts to kick on in a healthy way. Our body and our blood becomes more alkaline instead of acidic. We feel less of that stress, less ulcers, less of that discomfort. And one of the most beautiful things of experiencing a shift to the relaxation response on a daily basis is that the immune system strengthens. The immune system can operate in the way that it's meant to. Instead of being in fight or flight mode all the time, and instead of being in the body's in a state of, I need to be in survival always, the body starts to shift out of that. So at nighttime, when we rest our heads, we can actually sleep. There is an insomnia epidemic that's occurring in our country right now in a way that's never been seen before. And as someone who teaches meditation to executives and employees and teams and beyond, the thing I hear most is the trouble that people have getting a full night's sleep and falling asleep at night. And when our bodies are in a constant state of fight or flight and constantly feeling like they need to be surviving, even though we may be exhausted at the end of the day, when we close our eyes to rest, the body's system is still very much awake and prepared for survival. So it's really hard to sleep. But once we are building in a daily practice of meditation or quiet, and we're creating that space for this flight or fight to turn off and for the relaxation response to turn on, even if that meditation is happening in the morning or in the afternoon, by the time we get to sleep, the body is starting to remember and know that it's okay to turn off the fight or flight. Our baseline nervous system starts to operate not in fight or flight, but in something that's more balanced. So when it's time to go to sleep at night, we can actually sleep, and we can sleep through the whole night. And all of these physiological changes put us in a position where the way that we show up and contribute to the world and become discerning of how we can really be of service to what's important in our work lives and our family lives in regards to servicing the world starts to become really clear, and we can start to really step into that and own that. And the last thing I'll say about this is I love bringing this work and talking about this specifically in the workplace, because this is so critical to effective leadership when we're taking care of ourselves and we're also taking responsibility for our teams and helping our teams understand why this is so important. What starts to happen is our relationships change at work, the way that we contribute to work, the way that we think about products, the way we think about customers, the impact that our work has on the world. It all evolves. It becomes more fluid, clear, powerful. And as a result, what I see is that organizations can really shift. They can become far more dynamic, not only in their output and healthier relationships that happen internally, but they start to have a way more meaningful impact on the world, which is what it's all about.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, I know. It's this idea of making time to do other things, but sometimes we're just doing the bare minimum right now. And so um, people need to let go of that pressure, and finding the time to meditate really will help you go to the next level, or just breathe through the day in whatever way you can. But I'd love to talk a little bit more about, once we get past that point and we're feeling comfortable with whatever this dynamic is in our personal lives, how that's changed, and we're feeling like, okay, how can I get creative? Do I have to get creative in my business that I own? How do I get creative for my colleagues, for my kids, for my students? What practices are you utilizing? What do you recommend to kind of infuse creativity into our lives right now, to kind of help us to feel like we have that time and energy to commit to that?
I love that question. And for me, the answer is really simple. It's about prioritizing rest. And what I've seen through this work, and pre-pandemic, what I saw was, the 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 amount of work and the amount that we're pushing ourselves to achieve and to hustle and to be better. It's so great. We're outputting so much that we are hurting our brains. When you actually look at the science of the brain does not persist, meaning it doesn't always go. The brain pulses. And when we're able to operate and live our lives in a way that aligns with the brain's natural system of pulsing, we become a lot more effective at all the things that we want to give ourselves to. And what I mean by pulse is the brain rests and then it moves into focused work. It rests and it moves into focused work. For so many of us, especially those of us right now during the pandemic who have sort of lost our boundaries around work because it's all digital right now, the brain's always in focused work mode and it gets strained. And when it gets strained, it burns out. And this is why we're experiencing so much burnout. Now, if we're able to prioritize and create boundaries for our rest time, which is what the brain needs to optimally create, we start to see some pretty incredible benefits. And if you talk to, in my opinion, some of the most sustainable entrepreneurs, I'm not talking about environmentally sustainable entrepreneurs. I'm talking about the people who are really having an impact on business, who are able to enjoy their life along the way, sustainably in regards to they're able to be healthy, they're able to be with their families, and they're able to have a meaningful business impact in the world. They are people who stand for this. They're people who stand for prioritizing rest. And what I really encourage people to do right now, when we're in this position where so many of us are hooked on our phones and on our screens because it's really the only way we can communicate with each other, is to get really clear about boundaries you can create for when you can have screen-free time. I'm not even talking about meditation. This is, at an even more basic level. When can you take a 2-hour block from your phone? I try to, around 5:30, take a 2-hour block. I know it's not realistic for everybody. Take a 2-hour block from my phone. I just throw it into airplane mode. I also find that every night before I go to sleep, I have to put my phone in airplane mode. And when I wake up in the morning, I don't check my phone first thing. I may use my phone for the alarm and to switch off the alarm. But I keep my phone in airplane mode until I've had some time to get up, meditate, wash my face, start to energize. Then I'll turn on my airplane mode and start to see the notifications that come in. Instead of the second I wake up, first thing in the morning in bed, I'm downloading all the stresses of the day, or the excitements of the day too, but all the things of the day, right? Once we're able to get out of this rhythm and start to create these pockets where we're awake and not on our phones, and not directly in relationship with our phones, we start to give our brains more of this space to have that rest. I do something that I know not everyone is comfortable with or capable of doing, but I do a tech Sabbath. most Friday nights, from Friday night at sundown to Saturday night at sundown, I just turn my phone off, and I sort of build my life around that. It's incredibly valuable tool to have that rest space to ease the eyes from the screens and from the constant information that we're inputting and processing. And what I find that when we're prioritizing space from our phones, or just allowing ourselves to take more time to rest, just straight up more time to rest, that I create room for creativity. I create room for new ideas to be born. It's like the incredible thing that happens for those of us that are able to take vacations or go on vacations. When we're able to, take 5 days away from work, and with this new open space, we're able to start to think about things differently and new ideas start to form. We can create this in our busy lives. It's maybe a 2-hour block that happens instead of a 5 or 6 day vacation. But if we're able to make it happen on a regular basis, what I see people start to see is they're able to access something deeper. The brain is working in a more optimal way. My belief is that we have a limitless, expansive internal world with creativity and power and wisdom, but we tend to get so blocked through all the things that we've talked about. And we tend to push our brains so much that we really limit our body's ability to access these. And when we slow down, when we practice meditation, when we give ourselves space to go inward, we start to bring that to life. So, and this is something that I talked a lot about with Oprah on the tour, because she's a big advocate of this as well. Seeing rest as a source of power instead of rest as something that's lazy, right? Really prioritizing it and making it a critical part of our lives. And the last thing I'll say about it that I find to be so fascinating is that when we lived in tribes, when we lived in these quieter times, the amount of information that we would process in an entire lifetime living in tribes is equivalent to the amount of information that we process in one single day today in 2020. And when you consider that our brains are not very different than how they were 15,000 years ago, it helps us understand how challenging and why it can feel so challenging and overwhelming to live in the world in the way that we do today.
I'll say, I'll make a confession, Jesse. I only put on do not disturb during these candid conversations. So I need to take some accountability here and put into place some of these tools. But one of the best tools one of the best practices I've ever started from a rest capacity is just not to put an alarm on unless I have a morning call or a morning meeting. And I know not everyone can do that, but I know there's so much science behind our bodies naturally waking up, and my body still does wake up at a proper time in the morning, but that change in finding more time for rest has made a big difference in my mental capacity. And so if there's any way we can do that, whether it's through our sleep at night or taking the moment to rest through meditation, I know it makes such a big change for our body.
Yes, amen. I'm so glad to hear that you practice that. And, on those days where it's the afternoon is hit and we feel like we need to get through all these emails before we can finish the day and the body's just slugging, I really encourage people, if they're able to, and not everyone's able to be able to give themselves permission to say, I'm not going to complete this today. I'm going to tell whoever I said I was going to get back to that I'm not able to address this today. I'm going to let them know, be upfront and in integrity about it, but I'm going to go rest. And I think right now during this pandemic, it's so important for us to give ourselves that space and to communicate with our colleagues about that, because our bodies are extra tired right now because of the heightened sense of fight or flight that we're in because of this pandemic. And giving ourselves permission to work less hours if we're able to right now, finishing work an hour earlier than usual, it goes a long way right now.
Absolutely. Well, with that, Jesse, I think we should get into our meditation with you. And what I'll do is just remind everyone before we go into this meditation, it'll be about 5 to 10 minutes in length. But after that, we're going to try to squeeze in a few questions. So there is the Q&A box. There's also the chat box. You're welcome to post them in either section. Maybe you'll think of a question while meditating, because certainly you do think about things while doing so. But I'm going to go off screen so that you can focus on Jesse and close your eyes and get to meditating.
Thanks, Tori. So we'll do a meditation I'd love to take about 10 minutes for questions at the end. So we'll meditate for about 7 minutes. And To begin, I'd love for you to just find a comfortable seat. You don't have to sit in a meditation pose. Just find yourself seated comfortably. I like to sit with back support when I meditate. So I'm seated in a chair and I'm putting my back against the chair. And you can put your hands on your lap or on your thighs, whatever feels most comfortable to you. And let's go ahead and close our eyes. And to begin, just notice any of the sounds of the space that you're in right now. It may be totally quiet. You may hear other people or animals or pets. You may hear air conditioning units or heaters, sounds from the street or other rooms. But just slowing down to notice these sounds that are always in the background, but we so rarely stop to notice. And now taking a big breath into your belly and filling up your chest and letting it all out. And taking another big breath, filling up your belly, air expanding into your lungs, your chest filling, and holding your breath and sipping in a bit more air and letting it all out, allowing the body to start to relax. And one last big breath into your belly, air into your lungs and chest, and sipping in all the air that you can and holding it at top and then letting it all out. And feeling the body's nervous system starting to slow down. And bring your attention to your toes. Notice the bottoms of your feet. Notice your ankles and your shins. Notice your knees, your thighs, your hips. And allow gravity to pull you down into your seat. And allow your body to feel heavy and to let go. And noticing your lower back, your middle back. Noticing your shoulders and your neck. And bringing your attention at the back of your neck to the top of your head. Notice your scalp, your eyebrows, cheekbones, jawline, lips. Notice the weight of your tongue in your mouth. Bringing your attention to your nose. Notice the air just moving gently in and out of your nostrils as you breathe at your own natural pace. And as you continue to breathe in your own rhythm, without controlling your breath or forcing your breath, just breathing as you breathe, notice your chest as it very gently rises and falls. And bringing your attention to your heart. Notice any emotions or sensations that you may be feeling in your heart. And whatever feelings may be coming up for you, to just allow yourself to be with those, to welcome them, to not judge them, to accept whatever emotions may be there for you. Knowing that so many of us are experiencing challenging emotions right now. We remember that by allowing ourselves to feel what we're feeling, the emotions loosen. And this process and practice of accepting our emotions is like opening a window and letting the air out. And while you're noticing the sensations in your heart, simultaneously notice your breath. Noticing your heart and your breath at the same time. Now bringing your attention to yourself, and think about an area in your life where you may be being tough on yourself, where you may be beating yourself up. It can be so easy to feel like we're behind, like we're not enough, like there's more we can be doing. We take this moment to bring ourselves some gentleness, some compassion. Be easy with ourselves. Send yourself love. In whatever way it looks like or feels like for you, feel into your heart opening as you send yourself love. Remembering that so much of our power comes from our ability to love ourselves first. And before we end our practice, while keeping our eyes closed, bring in some gratitude for what we've shared together in this moment virtually, all tuning in from different parts of the world to have a moment where we can talk about and learn about how our bodies work today. Gratitude for this moment where we could slow down, where we could share quiet and check in with ourselves. There's so many different things we can be doing with our time, but we decided to do this together. And we close with a final moment of gratitude for our beating hearts, for our ability to breathe, gratitude for the gift that is life. And in your own time, as you feel ready, you can begin to very slowly open your eyes and take your time as you do this. Don't feel like you need to rush. Just slowly come back to the screen. And we'll have some time for a couple of questions.
That was great. Let's see. So, like I said, if you have a question that you've thought of now, go ahead and submit. We did have a few that were submitted with registration, and I like this one in particular, Jesse. You know, we're mostly adults, or I think we have some students in high school on watching, but some of us are parents, some of us are educators, and I'd love for you to share any tips of how you can teach children of all ages a meditation practice.
Yeah, definitely. I love this question, and I love that people are thinking about this. I think this is some of the most important work we can do, especially when we're looking at how we can bring these tools of wellness and well-being to the youth and create these foundational practices for young people right now as they really start to explore their leadership. I think it's one of the most important things we can do. There are a couple different resources that are really great for teachers. There is the Calm app offers free resources for teachers, which is a great one to access. And then my sister, who teaches 5th grade in the public school system, she does 10 minutes of mindfulness and meditation every day with her students. And she did a program, she and several of her teachers at her school did a program that trained them in doing this through the Niroga Institute. And if anyone's welcome to reach out to me, or I can share the link with you, Tori, to share it with other people. But I just really recommend basic trainings where teachers can incorporate this into their lives. And I think they'll see that it has an incredible impact, not only in the students' lives, but in the classroom and beyond.
Love that. Yeah, if you want to share the link, what we'll do is share a list of resources after with the recording of the video as well, so we can have that for everyone. Yeah. A lot of these questions we covered, but I'd love to just make sure that we touch on this one. What do you recommend for those with anxiety or depression and dealing with this pandemic, and maybe some physical activities to do during this time?
Similarly to what I was talking about before, for those of us that are feeling a heightened sense of anxiety or depression, I know so many of us are. I know that I've been feeling a heightened sense of anxiety too at times. Like I mentioned earlier, prioritizing rest is one of the most important things. You know, really giving ourselves what we feel we need right now. If that's, you know, more time to sleep in, more time to take a bath or shower or to read, maybe more time to be off our screens, maybe it's more time to watch movies that bring us joy. But really giving ourselves what we need right now, and giving ourselves permission to do that is really important. I've also found that the moments where I've been feeling really heavy in my anxiety, what I've been practicing is just allowing myself to feel it. And this is a tough practice, but it's really about allowing ourselves to surrender to and not resist the challenging emotions that come up. When we resist them and feel like we need to get rid of them, it can create a heightened sense of the emotion. And when we surrender to the emotion and accept it and drop any resistance or judgment to the emotion, it starts to loosen, and we create a space where we're able to actually process and move through and learn from the challenging emotion that we're having. So that mindfulness approach to just being with our emotions without judgment is really important. And then some form of movement's really great. And I find that for me, that may just look like leaving my phone at home and just going for a 5-minute walk, right? Without doing something else, just going for that walk, being with myself, breathing. And the last thing that I can recommend for those moments where we really feel the heightened anxiety is a really simple breathing practice. And it's where we take a big breath into the belly. And once we've taken in all the air that we can, we hold it. And then when we're ready, we release it. We do that 3 times. So it's a big breath in, holding your breath once you've brought in all the air that you can, and then releasing it, doing that 3 times. It's a great way to immediately start to bring balance back to the nervous system and to take you out of the fight or flight.
That's such a good tip. Yeah. I know you've covered that in some of the big quiet meditations that you've been doing weekly on Instagram, which I'd love for everybody to be able to follow along and join. Are you going to be doing those weekly still?
Yeah, we offer them 4 times a week on the Big Quiet Instagram Live. I do 2 of them every week. We explore different themes and meditate together.
That's great. We'll make sure that that is also a link so everyone can join. I typically join on Tuesdays when Jesse's leading, but I know that there's also one with the sound bowls on Wednesdays or Thursdays.
Wednesdays for sound bowls only,
yeah, which is really cool as well. We are running out of time, and it looks like we've covered most of the questions, but if Jesse, do you want to leave us with anything that you feel like would help inspire us to build community while we're physically distant right now? I know that you've shared all the different ways you've done it throughout your life, throughout your career, and I know we're pretty limited right now, but if you have any inspirational words or suggestions on how to continue that sense of community while we're physically distant, I think that's really important for us.
Yeah, sure. The first thing that I would say is as a baseline, give yourself the rest that you feel like you need right now, and let go of any FOMO that you may feel about digital stuff. It can feel really easy to feel like I'm missing out on things that are virtual events that are happening, and gatherings and birthday parties and things you may see online. You know, as a starting point, I'd say give yourself the rest you need, which you know has been my theme through in this conversation. And once we're in a place where we feel like we're getting the rest that we need, that's when we can start to think about ways that we can reach out and gather virtually in ways that feel good. You know, one of my friends yesterday, one of my really close friends, when our group of friends get together, we have this funny tradition where we write plays and then we act them out with each other. And he suggested that we do one of those and find some time where, you know, 5 or 6 of our friends could just come together and have that experience. You know, silly, stupid, but a meaningful way to just come together and see each other and have fun in that way. And I think that there are really simple ways that we can think about building some sort of virtual rituals. I know a lot of people that are, you know, setting up weekly times where they connect with friends in different states or with colleagues or with family members. And I just like to encourage people that this is a great opportunity for us to all be leaders of specifically be community leaders, that we don't need, you know, business skill sets or capital or, you know, special tools to be able to gather people right now. And really all that it requires is thinking about something that would bring you joy that you could share with other people, and then extending that invite to a couple people. And it can be a really gratifying and fulfilling way to offer your gifts, to start to explore leadership, and to put that first step forward.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. Well, we hope that this has been a way to build community for those to join us for some conversations. And it looks like we're on the dot for 4 o'clock over here on the East Coast. So thank you so much, Jesse, for today. It's been super helpful with all the tips and insights you've shared. Many of those we've talked about before, but I hope that they gave something to those watching us. And it's always great to see your face across the other side of the country while we're physically apart right now.
Thank you so much, Tori. It's so good to see you too. And I'm so glad we could share this. Thank you everyone for participating and for the great questions that came in. And for the question that Susan asked, I'll just respond here. Feel free to DM me. If anyone has other questions, DM me on Instagram. My handle is @JesseIsrael, and I'd be happy to speak to your questions.
That's great. Yeah, we'll include that as well. So once we end this recording, we'll get you an email out tomorrow, get you a link to the recording so you can watch again, share with others, use that last part as your daily meditation if you'd like to start your practice, and we'll give you links to all your resources. And then we'll be back again next Thursday. For the foreseeable future, we're doing this every Thursday with our speakers. And so next week, it'll be with Dr. Ned Howell, talking about reconnecting in a disconnected world. So we're kind of on a similar wavelength here with the doctor. So we're really excited about that. But thank you again for tuning in today. Thanks, Jesse, so much for all of your wisdom. And we will see you all soon. Thanks again.
Thanks, Tori. Thanks, Outspoken. And thanks, everybody, for tuning in.